our purposes, and those evolve over time, have a broad framework within which we move. They help define us as a group. They are extremely useful for setting the context and the boundaries for what we believe in this world. And it is, I think, that anyone who would not comfortably feel situated within the framework of these would not feel comfortable. But the most distinctive part of our religious movement, all the way back to its roots in Channing and others, and Imfro and others, is that it invites, it indeed encourages each person to develop within this broad framework their own personal beliefs, principles, and purposes that flow out of the depths of their own personal experience. That does not mean renounce religion that a person grew up in. It does not involve having to just the faith that one grew up with. So, for example, it means making it your own and not simply using it in the manner in which it was conveyed to you in a dogmatic fashion. So, for example, if you grew up in the Christian, Jewish faith, or Islamic faith, it means you think through what is real and true traditions, and out of that process, create what is real and true and genuine for you. Conversely, it might be, as it is a considerable number of people, that they, to a large extent, reject the tradition out of which they came. And they might define themselves in a scientific or humanistic orientation and frame of reference. So be it. Have a profound faith that allowing people to follow a that is genuine for them will not lead to chaos or disunity. We believe profoundly in the idea of e pluribus unum, out of many one. That is to say that we can be authentic, at the same time we can get along and live in a unity with one another. This idea has deep roots in American history and the American experiment. And we find out and discover quite often that we do share many beliefs in common, despite our individual pursuits. Truth be told, however, this strategy to encourage, support people to develop their own beliefs with help and support is risky from an institutional standpoint. We would be far more successful, I speak of the Unitarian Universalist movement, we're more successful as an institution if we just said, this is what you must believe, take it or leave it. This is who we are. What many people in the larger population want, one to tell them what to think and believe. We don't do that here. If you look around, you will see, if you make a tour of all the churches in this city today, you will see that numerically it is a much more successful strategy to lay out before people what they should believe. But the UU tradition did something unique. It holds dear a belief that we are inheritors of something very precious. The right of conscience, the right to self-determination, and of making our own choices and decisions freely. We believe that this has an advantage compared to other ways of proceeding. We believe that doing so upholds and strengthens the dignity and the maturity of persons. We believe that beliefs, principles, and purposes must grow out of the soil of each individual experience. If we do not clarify our principles and our purpose, you can be sure someone else will. We are all driven by unconscious assumptions, derived from our role in the family of origin, the culture around us, and other major influences. But this is the place where we do this sacred thing, where we attempt to nurture and foster the individual to emerge from these influences, to create their own beliefs, principles, and goals. The pursuit of wisdom is another name for this effort. And it goes against the tide of how religions normally operate. Religions arose through the centuries to help people identify their beliefs, their principles, and the purposes. Out the years have helped millions of people in this way. Occurs, however, when religions create beliefs, principles that over time become stagnant and lose connection with the reality of the context of the time, realities of life. A further problem occurs when religions use the power inherent in their ability to tell people what to believe, to accumulate authority over people, and to control them to a certain extent. Something we see happening in our own country right now in myriad ways. In contrast, as I said before, we go in a different direction. The support of the individual in their search. And we believe this ultimately will strengthen persons, it will strengthen families, it will strengthen communities and society, and contribute to the greatest good of society. Let me define beliefs, principles, and purposes. A belief statement about how one sees the world, such as, I believe that life is part of one vast interconnected web of life. A belief shapes our view of the world. Principles, in contrast, give us direction about how we will interact with the world on a daily basis. Purposes point to where we are choosing to direct our finite and limited energy. It represents goals and priorities. We will use the precious energy of life that is given us and is finite. So now I wanted to shift to sharing some of my own principles. And let me be clear, these are not principles I'm thinking other people should adopt. They're principles that come out of my own experience, that are drawn from the educational experiences I've had, from the people I've met, from the things that have impressed me, from the interactions I've had, settled in my soul and mind and heart as this is true, and are adapted to my life. That's my cue to go to my principle. So it is something that comes out of me, not in a sense relevant to other people, it's relevant to me. But these are the ways, remember, I am trying to choose to interact with the world. And I will briefly talk about where I've derived, or mentioned where I've derived each of them. Number one, focus all your attention, energy, and action only on what you can control and what is in the realm of your responsibility. So there's a lot of things I would like to change, maybe you too. They're none of my business, or I don't control them. Second, be present, empathetic, and responsive to, but are others. I want to be with others. I want to be present to others. I want to say, I'm here, I'm showing up, but I don't want to do for others what others must do for themselves. That's true for me as a person. That's true for me as a minister vis-a-vis a congregation. Be grateful as possible, as deeply as possible, for as many things. I've taken that from various religions. The others I took from Bowen and some other places. The next one is act responsibly, even when others act irresponsibly. Have you ever had anybody who made you mad for any reason? And you think being mad with them gives you a righteous right to strike out against them? Well, this principle is against that. It's from Bowen. Next one, seek win-win solutions for every relationship challenge. That comes from Marshall Rosenberg. The next one is take full responsibility for your words, actions, and reactions at all times and in all situations. That comes from Bowen. The next one is focus on facts rather than assumptions, speculation, or imagination regarding what is true, especially as anxiety rises. That comes from Bowen. That's very helpful if you're a... The next one. When you suffer setbacks or ask yourself, what can I learn from this? And act accordingly. The next one is, whenever there is disharmony or disorder in a relationship system around you, ask yourself, what is my contribution to this? Then change that in self and bring that changed self back into the relationship system. That is from Bowen. The next one is savor each moment, person, and experience. That is from Buddhism. That is a sample of my principles. I have 29 of them. And I won't bore you to tears with all of them, but here they are in this set of card decks. There has to be a way to integrate principles into life, because the human emotional system and the human mental system are too unstable to carry these principles around in the head easily. So I try to integrate them into my life in the following way. I read of my principles, all 29 of them each morning. And then I take one of those principles from this deck of principles, card deck, and I carry it in my pocket, and I read it about 3 times during the day, and I try to focus exercising that principle during the course of the day. And eventually, because I have around a month's worth of principles, I recycle them once a month. So eventually, they become a part of my consciousness through multiple repetition. I revise all of my principles annually. Let me stress to not make this too complicated. A person could adopt one simple principle, such as the golden rule, and spend their entire lives trying to do it. And I also wish to stress that it is literally impossible to live in accord with one's principles every day. We may have days when we live in harmony of the time, or no time. or have days when we are successful in living out our principles to a high degree. A week, if a person were able to live most days, 40% of the time, under the influence of their principles, that would be a great achievement. But it is vital, despite lapses, to never, ever give up and to always be gentle with ourselves and again and again to our guiding principles, however many times we stray, because if we don't, other forces, emotional and cultural and so forth, will take the steering wheel. Allow me to compare this to sailing. There was a time in my life where I spent quite a bit of time sailing, and I have a fondness for that activity. Without guiding principles, like a sailboat, without sails, cast on the journey of life without direction and personal meaning or focus. Developing personal principles is a way to define ourselves amid the pressures, storms, and trials of life. I look forward to a continuing discussion with you about this. And now the choir, singing about a belief and principle you might want to consider.